What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Movie Emporium's TV review of Snowpiercer Season 3, Episode 2, The Last to Go. This is once again directed by Kristian. Now, before we begin, as always, if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like any videos, awesome, hit that like button as well as comment below on any video to watch, including this one. Okay, so another interesting episode. Definitely, once again, an improvement over Season 2. I know I had a couple comments saying Season 2 was better than Season 1. Yes, I know Sean Bean was in Season 2. I know he's great. I had issues with it. That's just my personal opinion. If you really want to know my honest thoughts of each episode, there is definitely a playlist of each episode to talk about. But I get it. I understand bringing Sean Bean for anything for most of the part, and you get like really great stuff. But this episode is a continuation, once again, from the first episode. Snowpiercer and Wilford's Big Alice are, of course, separated still. And we'll do the same thing as I did last week, where we'll talk about each train. And then we'll get into the ending and so on and so forth. And so we'll get into the smaller amount of stuff first. We'll talk about Snowpiercer, which had the least amount of stuff to do this week. We basically continue after the last week. Basically, Layton has had those visions of this tree. He's also rescued someone who was down in this like nuclear reactor, as we find out. But the character we find out that was rescued is a character named Asha, who's played by Archie Panjabi. And she is an individual that really, you can tell she's been not around people for quite a while. She doesn't talk. She's very skittish, but she's an individual that has very much, as she says, very much a connection to Snowpiercer. And basically what we find out, and this is kind of going out of order what the episode did, but it just in essence to kind of break it down to make it easier. Basically Asha was part of a research group in a nuclear bunker. In its essence, there was a nuclear reactor down there. I guess they were testing something for Wilford and Wilford's crew, and some marauders came around. I would love to hopefully see some of this footage of the marauders attacking these people, just kind of get a reference point and stuff like that. But she talks about the marauders attacking her group, and about half the people, there's like 40 people, they were killed. So this is happening in like the last 5 or 6 years of the current events. And basically her cousin or her nephew or cousin or whatever is 15 years old. Because of all the poisoning from radiation poisoning, a lot of people died from that. And so what ends up happening is she ends up having to kill, or basically put down, her 15-year-old nephew or whatever, who has leg cancer, and he like keeps asking her to kill him just to make the suffering stop. And so she does. So for the last 4 years she's been by herself, and that's when of course Layton pops up and rescues her and stuff like that. But the funny thing is they were doing research on plants and stuff like that. So when she's in her room, she touches the plants and some of the plants die. You can tell she has some radiation problems. And I think that's interesting. I'm really interested with this new character to see where she goes, how she adds kind of perspective to Wilford and maybe a new angle to this whole entire series. It maybe makes it cool. Maybe has some effects with the dream stuff or the visions that he's been having, which I question whether these visions, and Bess does the same thing, whether these visions that Layton is having is effect from the radiation. Maybe the radiation affected some portion of his brain in a sci-fi sense because of the sci-fi show, and made him have a vision of this tree, maybe had a vision of this thing, this place. Even Miss Audrey's questioning, like, what is this? Who is this person? And what is this? What are you looking at? And, of course, they're trying to find, on Snowpiercer, they're trying to find a place that's livable in this middle of this crisis that is the ice age that they're currently in. But he's going through a bunch of books and so on and so forth. Like I said, the Asha stuff, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more stuff later on. Wilford's going to be connected with her and stuff like that. But that's pretty much all her character. And in essence, he finds that what he's seeing is in the Gulf of Aden. And that this, of course, is like, text of an old script and stuff like that. So he's seeing that where they're talking about going to is, in essence, their last location that they were talking about. So maybe he's seeing something in a sci-fi sense that's seen for the future where they could end up leading. This is my prediction. Either Layton's going to die at the end of this end of the season, or they're going to kind of group together. I just get this impression that either Wilford or Layton's going to die at some point at the end of the season, just to kind of push the story forward into what I think is the next 2 seasons that will lead up to the series finale. I think season 5 is going to be the end of the series, or at least season 5, maybe season 6, depending on how much story they have left to tell. But you can definitely tell that Layton has some kind of prophet style logic to his reasoning. because he finds a tree, and the tree is called the Dragon Blood tree. And he's never heard of this tree before. He never learned about it in class, but because Bess is doing that similar trope that you see in a lot of movies and TV shows where like the parent doesn't believe the kid that there's a monster in the basement or something like that. I mean, she basically thinks Layton's kind of losing his mind a little bit, but he is really committed to the fact that this is probably where they're going to go because he saw grass, he saw the tree. He really believes the Gulf of Aden's the Eden, what they're looking for, and it's really interesting. Kind of like I said, very sci-fi, very mystical. Maybe in nature, I guess you could say. I'm intrigued. That's the kind of Layton stuff. That's kind of the, the Asha stuff. And of course, Aleks and Bennett are trying to find, they're trying to get themselves away. And they realize, that Wilford's, following them. But they figured out that they need to connect back with Big Alice because they don't have enough food. They don't have enough water because now they have another person on board. And they just got to figure out a way to do it with like a sneak attack. And they have no idea of how to do that. So, all that stuff's leading up, and then I'll talk about kind of where it ends, later on. But outside of that, there's not much else to talk about with the Snowpiercer stuff, because it's kind of just leading up to the small kind of seedlings of what I think the future series is gonna do in the future when it comes to seasons. The quest for the Eden, the quest for, kind of like Waterworld, trying to find land, I guess you could say, in a lot of aspects. So, but this leads into, of course, the Big Alice stuff, which is the majority of the episode. For the most part, it opens up, as it usually does. Ruth, in her haven, she is talking about, her husband and stuff like that, and then they're doing their thing, trying to keep everything in check with the revolution that is still in play, I guess you could say. Of course, the Jackboot people and Javier are coming down to her area, so she's kind of following them, I guess you could say, a little bit, and it leads to the back part of the train where they see a machine, where she sees a machine. Now, what this machine isn't really said, but in essence, what I've gathered before it's actually revealed is it's something that is going to affect Snowpiercer. And my conclusions were right, because when I was watching the episode, I'm like, oh, this must be like I want to say an EMP machine, and that's exactly what it is. It's an EMP machine to stop Snowpiercer, to turn off its electronics. Basically, Ruth sees this, sends a rat to Pike, who apparently this rat's very smart. Rat gets to Pike, and they basically find someone to try to stop the machine from working, try to break it down and stuff like that. So that's really interesting. And then on top of that, Wilford is doing Wilford stuff. He is, watching the train. They actually do set off the EMP, and we see this like big glow of purple and red and yellow, but it doesn't seem to affect Big Alice, which I thought was kind of interesting. But in the end, we have LJ and John, who I don't really see their purpose in this series outside of just showing how evil Wilford is. And what they end up doing is John ends up proposing to LJ. He ends up, asking for her hand in marriage, and she is an opportunist. She is an individual that wants power, as she always has, and she convinces John to go to Wilford to tell him, we want his approval in the hand of marriage and stuff like that. And they go up there. Wilford's excited. He's like, yes, we're gonna have a big wedding. We're gonna have everybody involved. John, seeing what's happening, gets really mad at LJ as they're down in their, where they live. And he's using this to his advantage to kind of, take over everything. And LJ is an individual, like I said, that really just can't see past her illogical reasonings, and he walks away, and she doesn't get what's going on. And that's where it basically leads that Wilford is basically having everyone prepare the marriage. They're basically going to do the marriage and the dance card and stuff like that. It very much feels like something. I was thinking about this when I was watching the episode. The whole Snowpiercer thing really feels like BioShock, if you know BioShock in a lot of ways, where it's very dystopian, very run down. The way Wilford acts feels very much like an Andrew Ryan and stuff like that, who's like the main leader of course, this, utopia under the water and stuff like that. And I thought that was kind of interesting to think about, because there is points when John and LJ are getting married, and then they're in the car, and Wilford's doing the service as the priest and stuff like that. And you really feel that he has a very Andrew Ryan like feel to him. But basically, Wilford approaches LJ, uses his manipulation ability on LJ to kind of make her think that she's going to be more powerful than she is. And then it leads into the John stuff, where he is basically warning John not to ruin this kind of opportunity and stuff like that. And There's a moment where only Sean Bean would do a Sean Bean thing, and he basically grabs John by the nuts, the balls, and stuff like that, and he tells John to do the same thing, and they start squeezing, and I'm like, only Sean Bean would get away with doing something like this, because that's what Sean Bean does. He just makes everything that much more wackier and funnier and fun and stuff like that. That's why Sean Bean's so great in this series. Is just there's something very charismatic in the evilness that he is in the series, and especially what he usually does in TVs and movies and stuff like that. But it's all about manipulation. It's all about the twisting and turning and machinations about how Wilford can kind of turn the wheels and the screws on the people in Snowpiercer and so on and so forth. It leads, of course, Zara. It leads, like I said, Pike and stuff. They're going to try and tear down the machine. It leads Zara to basically go up to Javier to bring Javier down with a lie to talk to Ruth. And this is when Ruth discovers the EMP. Javier, blah, blah, blah. He goes back, and then, Kevin stops him and goes, what are you doing down here? He's like, I'm collecting data tapes. And this is when Kevin kind of has an inkling about what were you really doing down here. He's very suspicious. So he goes to the back of the car. What ends up happening is, in order to kind of deflect what's actually going on, Ruth ends up sacrificing herself in the essence of being arrested so that they can finish the job of the whole, the EMP thing to destroy it. And so she goes up and she's arrested, and during the wedding dance or something like that, Wilford sees that Kevin has gotten someone, and Wilford goes off to talk to Ruth, and he's like, we're gonna put your arm into the into the thing where it'll freeze it and they can break it off, and then she'll be permanently damaged forever. And in essence, I love Ruth's kind of going up against Wilford, and just like, I'm here for a bigger cause than you, and so on and so forth. So I really enjoyed that. I think Ruth's become one of those characters I really like in a series like this, where she's just very willing to do whatever it takes to do the right thing, and that's what she's always have a belief in. Even though at one point she was very much for Wilford, I think her character has gone through such a 180 that she's become a very complex, very three-dimensional character that she never was, and I really love that about her character. So they take her down to, of course, put her arm out into the weather, into the cold to freeze off, like what happened in the first episode of the series. So this, of course, leads into Pike and his group of people are trying to stop, or trying to disable the EMP. They accidentally set it off, and they've decided that they're going to throw it outside the car, push it outside the car, outside into the snow. Hopefully they'll freeze and destroy it or whatever. And it causes the EMP to explode, causes the whole entire train of Big Alice to stop because the electronics are now dead, and basically allows Snowpiercer to find Big Alice and exactly where Big Alice is, because of the EMP was big enough to kind of send out a signal. So it actually hits Snowpiercer, causes a little bit of electronic problems at first, and has electronics come back. And this leads into basically Snowpiercer, like I said, I was going to talk about the end. Snowpiercer has devised a way, because they need to get back to Big Alice to get more food and stuff like that, to find the location. And so Javier is basically traveling down the tracks, and all of a sudden Snowpiercer comes flying by him, which was kind of awesome. And basically it leads into the two trains are side by side with one another. Wilford, who is, of course Ruth was saved, because that's what you kind of do in these series or episodes where she's about to have her hand put out, but she's saved because she's a main character. And Wilford goes, prepare for battle, you scrubs. And he's very much a pirate. He's like, prepare for battle and stuff like that. And that's kind of like where the episode ends. He ends with, I'm assuming it's going to be a standoff or some kind of cool sequence of fighting. Maybe, I don't know, Snowpiercer, so sometimes that doesn't happen. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's an episode that is kind of a middle episode. It has a lot of progression, more progression than I was expecting. I didn't expect Snowpiercer and Big Alice to be, at the end of this episode back together again in some form or fashion. I thought it was going to take like 5 episodes, but they have apparently a good trajectory for this season, at least at this moment. We still don't have Jennifer Connelly back, in the character of Melanie. She hasn't come back, and so we'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens between Layton and Wilford. We'll see what happens with the Big Alice and Snowpiercer. Overall, we'll see how this overall arching thing happens. Like I said, I think there's going to be some really interesting moments that will lead into some really interesting standoffs in the next episode. Like I said, I haven't seen it yet, so we'll definitely know from there. I think overall it's a good episode. I think this is, once again, a much better season than than season 2 ever was, even after 2 episodes. I think it's very interesting, a lot of fun. I think the LJ and John stuff are a little kind of distracting from the main story, but I understand what it was doing. It was basically making Wilford showing his ticks and how he works and stuff like that. And it's really gonna be interesting to see how John and LJ affect the story. Maybe they're gonna have, pushback on Wilford. Maybe they're both gonna die. Who exactly knows? But I thought it was very intriguing, I guess you could say, that they had a marriage. I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's interesting to see how the back part of Big Alice reacts to everything, and Kevin and his, basically become, super evil genius type of guy and stuff like that. And yeah, it's a good episode. Is it as good as last episode? Not really, because last episode has some really interesting concept and theories. But if I were to rate this episode, just kind of get basic with my ideas, I'd probably give like an 8.7 out of 10, which is really great. I mean, that's still a great review, but like I said, it really struggles against the last episode, which I thought was really great. So, but yeah, I think that'll do it. I think that'll be my take on Snowpiercer Season 3, Episode 2, which is called The Last to Go. As always, in the comments below, what was your overall take on the episode? Are you still excited to watch the series after, the second episode? What did you like? What did you not like? All the good stuff. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at top. The fun's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.